What's up, everyone? Welcome back to another live stream. Sorry for the late start here. As always, I like knowing where people are tuning in from, so let me know in the chat. And yeah, we're currently running a sale, Barebones Guitar Theory. Quick plug, I'll get it out of the way. Right now it's $14 for the next week. Normally it's $39. Link is in the chat, in the pinned comment at the top of the chat if you want to get Barebones Guitar Theory. Basically, it's a video course that's about the length of a normal 1 to 1.5 hour guitar lesson, designed to be taken in one sitting, one go, and it's going to get you up to speed on all the things that you need to know and none of the things you don't when it comes to music theory for guitar. Yeah, so the topic I want to talk about tonight is the classic modeler versus tube amp debate. Now, there's a reason I want to talk about it, and it's because over the last several months, I have seen so many people online. I'm really active over on Threads, and this is a really common thing that keeps popping up over on Threads, this sort of idea that tube amps are on the way out. I saw somebody in the chat earlier before I started saying, like, tube amps are on the way out. You know, people saying they would never go back to a tube amp or they would never buy a tube amp in the first place. And I think that's totally fair. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. But I want to talk about why I'm not ever going to go fully digital. Now, being that I do guitar YouTube for a full-time living at this point, I'm very privileged in that I get access to and get to play basically everything. All the modelers, a bunch of different plugins. I have a beautiful selection of tube amps. I'm very privileged, very lucky. And I have a lot of experience with modelers. I've toured with them. I've used them on sessions, on records, actually at Rick's studio. My first modeler I ever bought, I bought from Rick, was a, do you remember this, dude? It was a Kemper. It was right when the Kempers came out, a rack Kemper. I think I bought it in like 2015 or something. Again, I've used them. I understand the appeal. They are great tools, and I still use them quite a bit. These live streams that I've been doing the last several weeks, I have been plugged into my Axe effects here in the rack. I make presets for the Quad Cortex or for the Helix, for example. I've profiled all of my amps. Well, not all of them, but a long time ago, I profiled all my amps in the Kemper ecosystem. I'm not a curmudgeon or troglodyte when it comes to modelers. But to me, and I should point out that this is just my perspective. The things that I'm going to talk about here are just my point of view. This is the reason why I would never go digital. I'm not saying that you should never go fully digital. I know there's probably people here in the chat. In fact, actually, let me know if you are fully digital. Let me know in the chat. And what modeler do you use? Because I think that's an interesting cross section. Not only who has gone fully digital, or if it's plugins, whatever. I want to know. So there's a few reasons why. So like I said, modelers are great tools. They fulfill a need that I think a lot of working guitar players have now, which is the ability to play silently on a silent stage, or in a rehearsal space, or in a studio setting, or in their home studio setting. You can play silently, and now, quite frankly, you can get tones that are as good when it comes to recorded guitar tones as the real thing, right? I've been recording guitars for 12 years now. I love recording guitars. I love sticking mics in front of amps. I love preamps. I love, love, love this stuff. And I can tell you that in most cases, if you take a good modeler that has a good preset, a good profile, a good capture, whatever it is, and then you take a good amp that's mic'd up well, and you record them and you put them in the context of a mix, you cannot tell the difference. You just can't. Even people with the best ears, the best engineers, the best players, can't tell the difference between a great modeled guitar sound and a great recorded guitar sound in most cases. That's a blanket statement. But in my experience, once you actually put it in the context of a mix, you can't tell, right? So that's a point for the modelers. They're great. You also have, with things like the Axe effects or Quad Cortex or Kemper, you have access to basically every single amp type, amp sound that you would ever want. And then some. You know, Axe effects in particular, I made a video about it a couple years ago, and how just, in my opinion, it's the best sounding of all the modelers still. I think Axe FX 3 is the best, just out of the box, the best sounding modeler that there is, but it is so overly complicated. It's just insane. I mean, I still stand by what I said in that video a few years ago. Trying to use the Axe-Fx, trying to program it with the front panel is insane. It's the worst user interface I think that exists. And that made so many Axe-Fx bros mad. Somebody sent me a Gear Page thread or some forum thread where people were just trashing me for that video and just super mad that I said that the user interface sucks. It sucks, man. It just does. You really have to use the software editor to get the sounds dialed in and to get the most out of the Axe-Fx. I think you have to have it plugged up to a computer, and you have to use the editor, right? I know a lot of people disagree with that, but so if I say all that, they're indistinguishable on recordings from tube amps. They're incredibly versatile. They solve a problem. You have access to every single type of guitar sound that you could ever dream of. Then why would I never go fully digital? Because for me, the options are overwhelming. And I've noticed this about myself in the last several months, right? My Axe-Fx stays on the exact same preset. I have a AC20 Deluxe preset that's a stock Axe-Fx preset, and I literally have not changed the Axe-Fx off of that preset in over a year. It sounds great. It has the effects that I like. It takes pedals well. When I'm using the Axe-Fx, that's what it is. So essentially, for the last, honestly, probably 2 years now, the Axe-Fx 3 has been a rack-mounted Morgan AC20, which I have a real one over there. I have a head that I've had for 10 years, 12 years, something like that. Same thing when I was using the Kemper. I spent so much time profiling all of my amps, buying profiles, buying the Michael Britt profiles or the Tone Junkie profiles, downloading them, and literally dozens and dozens of hours of my life spent going through and doing this, like click, 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 adjust some top end here, bring the gain down, right? Only to go through all that time and end up playing the exact same 2 or 3 profiles and never switching off of them. Same thing with the Helix profiles or presets that I made. I would just stick with the same ones. I treat these things like amps. And again, this is just my perspective. I know not everybody is like this. I know a lot of people get a ton out of the usability and the versatility of these things. It's just not me, man. I don't like spending my time in a software editor or with a god-awful user interface or, with a touch screen or something, dialing in presets and tweaking EQs and stuff like this. The reason I always go back to tube amps is because I turn it on, I dial in the sound, the amount of gain, the volume that I want, and then I'm playing guitar. And that's it. I don't think about it. I don't have to dive through menus and go through presets. I'm not spending time online looking at buying presets and all this stuff. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. I mean, again, I've sold Line 6 Helix presets and Kemper profiles for 6 years, right? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it. I'm saying for me, every single time I get into using a modeler, a plugin, something like that, I end up spending more time tweaking the sound and exploring all of the options. And, well, what if I tried this IR? This mid-range is a little weird on this right now. Let me try tweaking the mic placement on the, actually, that's 57 is kind of harsh. What if I put a 121 on it? Oh, that's a little weird. Let's try the 160. And then before you know it, I've spent an hour and a half sitting in front of my computer and I haven't played any guitar. And that's just me. There's too many options. There's too many things to sort of dig in and tweak. And again, part of that is because of, with what I do with the YouTube channel, having access to all the stuff, right? Like, you don't ever become an expert in one specific modeler or profiler or whatever. I have, with the exception of the Helix, I feel pretty good about understanding the Helix and the Kemper because I've had it the longest. But, the The Axe effects, again, because I haven't used it, I haven't tweaked it in so long, I'd have to kind of relearn how to actually get the most out of it. Quad Cortex is pretty usable. That's one thing I like about Quad Cortex. But point is, I just end up spending more time tweaking and messing around with the actual modeler than I end up playing guitar. So that's like an at-home sort of situation. But what about gigging, right? I mentioned earlier, I've toured with the Helix, I've toured with Kemper. I've taken the Quad Cortex out on a few very, very short runs, like 3-4 show runs, and I've used it. And they've worked, right? In most cases, they have sounded good. I won't say like as good as a tube amp in a live setting, because I truly don't think that modelers in a live full band setting sound as good as tube amps. I just don't. For a few reasons. One, going direct and having a silent stage, if you're a guitar player playing in the context of a rock band, let me clarify that. If you're a guitar player on stage in the context of a, rock or rock adjacent or indie or, any kind of band where the genre is very heavily drums, you've got live drums on stage, you've got, maybe a bass amp on stage. I believe in that context, you should have something on stage in your rig moving air. That can be a tube amp. That can be an FR cabinet that's hooked up to your modeler or whatever. But silent stages suck, man. They just suck. I've played them plenty of times. I've seen shows. I've been to shows where, the stage is silent, and it sounds good front of house. If you got a good front of house engineer that knows what they're doing, like, you can make it sound good. But in the context of going to see a rock band with a great drummer and a few great guitar players on stage, I firmly believe in most venues, you need to have an amp on stage moving air. The guitar and the amplifier together in the same space are working as sort of this like symbiotic organism, especially as you turn the guitar up, right? Like, ooh, that's a little loud. I don't want to clip my mic, but they're working together. If you have nothing on stage moving air, you're lacking a huge part of the guitar sound. And this is something I experienced years ago. I think before the pandemic, I played CMA Fest with my band Good Trouble. And if you don't know, CMA Fest is in Nashville. It's kind of like South by Southwest in that there's a bunch of stages all set up around downtown Nashville. Some of them are massive. Some of them are really small. Some of them are medium. And you get booked most of the time to play 2 or 3 sets, maybe in the same day, just kind of bouncing around stages. That's what happened. Last time I played South by Southwest, we played like 6 shows in one day, and it was exhausting. And so because of that, I knew we were going to be running around on and off golf carts and loading in and out. So I just brought my Helix floor unit and the Helix backpack and I think 1 guitar. And the first show that we played, I realized I had made a mistake because we weren't running in-ears. We were running wedges, and I had nothing on stage moving air. So when it came time to actually play the show, I was locked in position in front of my wedge. I could not move from the firing line of the wedge, because if I did, I would completely lose my guitar sound. Like, not like I couldn't hear it quite enough or it just sounded a little weird. Like, I had no guitar. So for the whole, I think we played a 45-minute set or something like that, I literally had to stand right in front of my wedge. And it sucked, especially when Ian started leaning on the cymbals really hard and it started washing out the guitar sound. I couldn't hear anything, and I played terribly because I didn't like the way I sounded. And if you've been in that situation, you know what I'm talking about. If you don't like the way that you sound on stage, you don't have confidence in yourself, you don't play well. This is why, tone matters to guitar players. Like, if you like the way that you sound, you're going to sound good. And so I started running after that day, the other 2 shows were about the same thing, just wedges, couldn't move, couldn't hear anything. So I started taking the cabinet, the Line 6 cabinet out, and it was much better. Just having something on stage moving air was much better. But there's just something about, for me, having a tube amp where I have it set, I know what it's going to do, I've spent time dialing in the sound, I have my pedals on my board gain staged to work with the tube amp. I'm not flipping through, a ton of presets and pages. It just, the simplicity works for me. And again, this is just me. If you're just joining, I'm not prescribing this to everybody or anybody in the chat. I'm explaining to you why I won't ever go fully digital. I still use modelers in specific circumstances. The last sort of big tour I did was about a year and a half ago. I went over to Europe, to the Netherlands, to tour with Roofman, and we had a few, I think 1 or 2 radio dates. And in that setting, I had the Helix, the HX Stomp on my board, and I flipped it into a modeler mode, went direct, and it was great, right? In some situations, you might be in like a throw and go sort of gig where you got to get on stage and it's just easier to go direct. I totally understand that. Or for certain gigs where it's more of a pop gig where you're very much so the hired gun guitar player, and you're there to serve the artist, you're there to serve the song, the MD, whatever, and they call for a silent stage. Sure, use your modeler. It's perfect for that. Spend the time dialing in your sounds. But if I'm playing with my band, or if I'm playing my music, I'm bringing an amp every single time. Unless I absolutely have to, for some other reason, go direct and use a modeler, I'm bringing an amp, because to me, that is my sound. Part of it is practical. Like I said, I like the simplicity of it. I like the fact that there's something on stage moving air. I like that I'm not relying on, menus and presets that I've set up beforehand. And then part of it is just this sort of superstitious romantic idea. I like the fact that there's something with tubes behind me. I like that it's analog. I like that it's, a real guitar speaker and a real guitar cab moving real air. You may disagree with that, but that's how I feel about it. So yeah, let me check the chat here. Use in-ears. Well, we do usually use in-ears with good trouble, but in that setting, CMA Fest, we couldn't. It was just a quick throw and go thing. There was no way to use in-ears. The other thing that I want to say is aesthetic. Aesthetic matters, especially in the context of a rock band, for example. You're in the entertainment industry. If you're in a band and you're going out and you're selling tickets to a show, you're putting on a show. Now, someone who's coming to see your show, they might love your band, they might love your music, or they might not really know who you are. Either way, they're coming to a show expecting a certain experience. And if it's a rock band or any rock band, any kind of like rock adjacent thing, I think aesthetics really matter. And I think having amps on stage, even just from an aesthetic point of view, really matters. People notice, right? Even if they don't know what an amp does, what it is, what it's for, they know because of things they've seen in the past, movies, TV shows, other concerts, whatever they've been to. They know that, oh man, this is going to sound good because it looks impressive. You see your gear on stage, you see the drums, you see the bass amp, you see the guitar amps. I think the aesthetic really matters. That's why you see so many bands where we opened up for, this was 2011 or 12. I was playing with this artist. We opened for Sum 41 in Charlotte, North Carolina. And this is the first time I had ever seen this. I've seen it many times since, but where they have the wall of like Marshall 412 cabs, right? But they're dummy cabs. And I remember loading in to the venue that day and seeing behind that wall of 412s where they were literally just cut in half and the back of them was open and it was just like 2x4 framing and like looked like scaffolding on the back. And the actual amp he was using was a tube amp. I think it was a dual rec or a triple rec or something, just sitting on top of a 212 cab, and they had a couple mics on the 212, right? But they had the fake Marshall stack. Oh, hello. They had the fake Marshall stack because aesthetics really matter, and people were paying to come see Sum 41. They wanted to see a big, loud rock show, right? So that's one thing that, not just from a practical perspective, having a silent stage sucks as a guitar player, especially when there's live drums. If there's live drums on stage, you can have a guitar amp on stage moving air. I don't care what the front of house engineer says. This might be kind of a hot take, but I don't think my job as a guitar player on stage is to please the front of house engineer or make the front of house engineer's job easier for them. My job is to play well, play to the room, play to the rest of the band, and serve the song as best as I can. And I understand that a lot of front of house engineers now are pushing for silent stages, but again, man, if I'm playing with my band or with my own music, I'm not playing silent. I'm not. I'm bringing a tube amp, and I'm probably going to bring like a 100-watt tube amp because that's what I want. That's what I want to hear, you know? So yeah, to wrap up this section, I mean, modelers are great. They're great tools. I use them all the time for different reasons. They're practical. I completely understand why people love them. I love them, right? Again, the sounds I've been able to get out of the Axe Effects or the Quad Cortex or this Dream pedal, the UA Dream pedal, it's genuinely impressive what these things can do, what these tools can do. And this is why I always go back to saying, I think we're in a golden age of guitar. We've never had this much access with the barrier to entry being so low to have all of these tools at our disposal. Even 15 years ago, 10 years ago, we didn't have all this stuff. The budget modeler stuff that's coming out now is fantastic. It sounds good. You can get amazing, if you know what you're doing, you can get amazing sounds out of it. But for me, if I'm playing with my band or recording my music or playing my music, I'm just going to use a tube amp. So yeah,